Hi, I'm Karina, and I did something that's still hard for me to talk about. Have you ever tried to take the easy way out to get out of trouble? Well, in my case, I took it to the extreme and it blew up in my face. I used to babysit for the family down the street. They had a 4-month old, Emma, and a toddler, Jace. I always felt a little nervous about babysitting, but the first couple of times went pretty well. Emma was a good baby, and well, Jace was wild, but we got along okay. The parents had warned me that Jace was in a stage where he was hitting and throwing things at people, and that I should tell them if he ever got out of hand. One day, I left Emma on the changing table, just for a second, I swear, while I turned around to get baby powder. I heard the most awful thud, and when I turned around, Emma was on the floor. She'd rolled off the table. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Emma wasn't crying, just laying there. She moved her arm, so I could tell she was still conscious, but all I could think was that maybe I'd brain damaged her. Maybe she had an internal injury. I was terrified. She did start to cry then. I picked her up as carefully as I could and rocked her and whispered to her. I started to cry too, thinking she'd never stop. Finally, she quieted down and I looked her over. At first, I was relieved. No visible injuries. Then I turned her over and saw a large bruise on her tiny head. I panicked again. How would I explain this to her parents? They'd kill me. I thought about calling my mom. She'd know what to do. But what if she blamed me? What if I got in huge trouble? Could I get arrested for this? Jace toddled in. He started babbling at me. He didn't say a lot of actual words yet, just da-da and stuff, and trying to hit me with a foam sword from his toy box. I was already so stressed about Emma, I couldn't handle Jace's wildness. But then, I got an idea. When the parents came home, I was ready. I showed them Emma's bruise and told them I was so sorry, but that while Emma was in her swing seat, Jace had hit her with one of his toy trucks. The mom looked shocked. Hard enough to bruise? Did he mean to? I don't know, I said. My back was only turned for a second, but the dad started looking Emma over. I think she's okay, I said. She cried a little after he did it, then quieted down. We'll get the pediatrician to look at her tomorrow, he said. The mom glanced at her husband and then back at me. We've been worried about this. We think Jace might have some issues with his development. We kept hoping he'd grow out of it. We've never known him to be violent towards his sister, though. I was scared they'd suspect I was making it up, so I went on. He's done it a few times, I lied. Sometimes he'll come up to her and try to hit her for no reason. And sometimes he just stares at her. I can't explain, but it's creepy. And one time I asked him if he liked his sister, and he yelled, "No!" All of this was just pouring out of me. I didn't know how to stop. My only thought was that I had to make sure they 100% believed Jace was guilty, not me. Why didn't you say something before? The dad sounded horrified. I didn't know if it was normal for toddlers or not. I mean, you said he's in a stage where he hits people. But he's always been so good with Emma. The mother looked truly scared. We'll have to get him into therapy. Thank you for telling us the truth, Karina, the dad said. I left the house shaking. I had lied to them. Now, Jace was going to have to go to therapy, and he hadn't even done anything. They would have taken him anyway, I tried to tell myself. They were already worried about him. But I couldn't escape the guilt. It gnawed at me for days. I could barely eat or sleep. I don't think I can explain how I felt. The next time they asked me to babysit, I pretended I was busy. The next time, too. My mom finally confronted me. Why haven't you been taking babysitting jobs?" "I'm too busy with school," I replied. "I saw your midterm grades. For someone who's so busy with school, your grades are dropping. Is something wrong?" "No!" I snapped at her. "Just stay out of my business." The next day in school, I threw up. I hadn't seen it coming. One minute, I was a little queasy. The next, I was running to the bathroom. I kept seeing that awful bruise on Emma's head. I finally took another babysitting gig to get my mom off my back. When the parents came home, I said Jason tried to hit Emma again, but I'd stopped him. I can't explain why I lied again. It was like the more I added to the story, the more it seemed true in my mind. Jace hadn't tried to hit Emma, but he was always trying to hit me with his toys. And wasn't that bad enough? He probably would hit Emma if she was closer in proximity to him. When I babysat again a few weeks later, I made up a story where Jace had brought rocks in from the outside and tried to throw them at his sister. "So, Karina," the mother said, "we were thinking about putting Jace on medication for ADHD since it seems like the therapy is not making him any better." Without thinking, I immediately agreed and said that it sounded like it would be a good step. But instead of looking worried, like they had in the past, the parents looked suspicious. "Come into the kitchen, Karina," the mom said. "I want to talk to you." I followed her into the kitchen, my heart pounding. She gave a deep sigh. "My husband and I were shocked by what you told us about Jace, so we got a nanny cam. It's in that teddy bear on the mantle." My breathing got shallow as panic rose in me. "Karina," she said, "Jace never went outside and got rocks. You and Emma were here the whole time until she went to bed. Jace never tried to hurt her." I nearly burst into sobs as all the guilt and shame and fear of the past few weeks hit me at once. But some part of me was defensive too. The part that had started to believe my own stories. That Jace was dangerous, out of control. "He did go outside," I tried to tell her. "He was..." "Karina, I want you to tell me honestly." Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was firm. "Has Jace been trying to hurt Emma?" I wanted to tell another lie. It would feel good to tell another one. "Yes," I said. "I'm being honest." The father got his phone out and showed me the tape. He said that they kept an eye on Jace for the whole day, and they know for a fact that he didn't do anything. I froze. I couldn't reply. They kept asking me why I was lying, and I simply had no answer. I just enjoyed it. I don't remember exactly what happened after that. I ended up at home, and the next day I stayed in bed. My mom kept telling me that everything would be all right, that the neighbors knew Emma's fall had been an accident. But I could feel that my mom was treating me differently. And a few days later, she said she wanted me to see a counselor. "You think I'm crazy?" I burst out. "No, honey, I don't. But I just want you to talk to her." I did go. The counselor and I discussed pathological lying and how the blurring of reality and fantasy, the sense that it would feel good to lie, could signify pathological tendencies in me. It sounded so horrible. But I've continued to go to counseling, and I'm getting better at recognizing those tendencies. I wrote a letter of apology to the neighbors, but they still haven't responded. There are days when all I can do is close my eyes and dig my nails into my palms and wish I'd never told that first lie. My mom says I may have to live with the guilt for a while. It's hard, but I know the fact that I feel guilty at all is a good sign. It means that I want to get better, and I'm going to keep trying.
Hey, I'm Danny, and I want to tell you what happened with my boyfriend Jason. I met Jason at a friend's party when I was 16. I couldn't help but notice how hot he was. Girls were hitting on him from every corner. But then, he came up to me and asked me to dance. Yes! The other girls looked so jealous their eyes were gonna pop out. The next day, we went out to the movies, but we didn't see much of the film. We were too busy making out in the back row, and oh my God, he was a good kisser. Jason and I started seeing each other like every day. He was so sweet, always buying me presents and sending me texts to tell me how much he loved me. Sounds like the perfect boyfriend, right? Only problem was, Jason could get really jealous. Like, there was one time we went for dinner. After the waiter took our order, Jason told me to stop flirting with him. I wasn't flirting with him. All I did was say thank you. But that was enough to put Jason in a bad mood for the rest of the night. When Jason drove me home, I told him he was being ridiculous. "I'm sorry, baby," said Jason. "It's just, I love you so much. I can't bear the thought of you being with another dude." It was hard dealing with Jason's temper, but I really loved him, so I always forgave him. We'd been seeing each other for about 6 months when we were in the den at Jason's house, playing video games, when this gorgeous guy walked in. Oh my God, he was hot. He was tall, with piercing blue eyes, and he was wearing a soldier's uniform. I mean, Jason was hot, but this guy was on another level. "Lucas!" yelled Jason, running over to hug the man. "Danny, this is my brother Lucas." I went over to meet him. Lucas held out his hand for me to shake, and I swear I felt like fainting when our fingers touched. Lucas told us he was home on leave from the army, and Jason said we should all hang out together. Jason asked if I minded because he didn't get to see Lucas much since he signed up. Did I mind? Are you kidding me? I got to hang out with a hot guy, and Jason wasn't going to get jealous. We had so much fun together in the couple weeks Lucas was home. We went to Six Flags, went out for dinner almost every night, and went to the movies. But the best times were when we were over at Jason's. And to be honest, some things got pretty steamy between me and Jason. Like, when the three of us watched TV, Lucas would kind of rub his thigh against mine or play with my hair without Jason noticing. This was wrong, but it made me want him so bad. On Lucas's last day of leave, we were all in the den when Jason remembered he was supposed to pick something up for his mom. He asked if I'd be okay staying with Lucas. Like he had to ask. Any excuse to spend time with his hot older brother. When Jason left to go to the store, Lucas came and sat right next to me. He was so close, our knees were touching. My heart started beating faster, and I bit my lip. I knew he wanted me, and all I wanted to do was kiss him. Thank God Lucas made up my mind for me. He leaned forward and kissed me passionately. Oh my God. I liked making out with Jason, but this was just, wow. With Jason, I feel like I'm with a boy, but Lucas, he was a man, and he really knew what he was doing. Jason and I had fooled around a lot, but we'd never gone all the way. I didn't feel ready, but at that moment, all I wanted was to be with Lucas. Things started getting hot and heavy, but then we heard Jason coming home. Quickly, I straightened out my clothes, and Lucas moved away from me. When Jason walked into the den, I thought he'd know straight away what we'd been doing. But he just smiled and walked over to kiss me. "Did you two have fun while I was gone?" he asked. Yeah, I said. When Lucas went back to the army, he started emailing and texting me. His messages were so romantic, and sometimes they were his hot nudes. He'd tell me all about what he wanted to do to me when he got back home again. I really felt like I was falling in love, you know? I always deleted his messages. It would break Jason's heart to know I was flirting with his brother, and I did love Jason. Anyway, Lucas was away in the army. It wasn't like I was having a real affair with him or anything, we were just talking. But then it happened. Lucas messaged me to say he was leaving the army and coming home for good. I felt such a mix of emotions. I was excited that Lucas was coming back, nervous about what would happen between us, and worried that Jason would suspect something. I didn't have to worry. Jason planned a surprise party for Lucas to welcome him home. There were loads of people there, and there was no chance for me to spend any time with Lucas. In fact, he barely spoke to me. If he hadn't sent all those sexy messages, I would think I'd imagined the time we kissed. And then it happened. Lucas yelled out for us all to be quiet because he had something to say. He held out his hand, and some girl I'd never seen before stepped forward to take it. "This is my fiancée, Sherry," said Lucas. "She's the reason I left the army, and I want to spend more time with her." Lucas was engaged? I felt like my heart had shattered into a million pieces. I'd spent so long dreaming about kissing Lucas again, and he was with someone else. I know I know. I shouldn't have been upset. I was with Jason, and we had a good relationship. It's just that I felt like I had something special with Lucas, and I wanted to see if it would go somewhere. Oh well, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Now Lucas was home, I saw a lot more of him, but Sherry was with him most of the time. It wasn't the same as before. We would go out on double dates together. The more time I spent with Sherry, the more I wondered what Lucas saw in her. She wasn't all that pretty. She was flat-chested and really dumb. She laughed at everything Lucas said, even if it wasn't funny. Lucas should have been engaged to me. It would be so much better for him. But then it happened. I was over at Jason's when Lucas walked in. He told Jason their mom had asked him to drive her to the store because her car wouldn't start. Jason asked me if I wanted to go with them, but I said no. This was my chance to talk to Lucas and find out what was going on. When Jason left, at first it was a bit awkward. I didn't know what to say, but then Lucas said, "I'm sorry." He told me that he'd only proposed to Sherry because she told him she was pregnant, but then she lost the baby. He felt guilty and didn't want to hurt her, but he'd been thinking about me all the time. "I know you're still with Jason," he said, "but I want you." That was all I needed to hear. We fell into each other's arms, ripping our clothes off. That first time with Lucas was incredible. He really knew how to please a woman. By now, Jason and I had been sleeping together for a while, but he wasn't great in bed. Lucas had experience, and it showed. After that, Lucas and I spent every moment we could together. I couldn't get enough of him. His body was amazing. So toned and buff after all his time in the army. I was head over heels in love. But then, I missed my period. I knew it wasn't Jason's baby because we always used protection, but Lucas and I weren't as careful. When I told Lucas, he was so sweet. He said he'd leave Sherry and we'd get married. He didn't want his baby to grow up without him. The worst part was telling Jason. I still cared about him, and he was my baby's uncle after all. Jason was devastated. I'd never seen a man cry before. I felt so uncomfortable. "I hope he cheats on you one day," he said. Lucas and I got married at the courthouse. It was only a small ceremony. Jason wouldn't come, and neither would his parents because they didn't approve of me running off with Lucas. My parents thought I was too young to get married and have a baby, so they didn't come either. I didn't care. Lucas and I were going to be together forever, but it wasn't long before things changed. I put on a lot of weight while I was pregnant. Lucas started making comments about how fat I was. Whenever I ate anything that wasn't a salad, he'd make snarky comments or snort like a pig. When our daughter, Mia, was born, I thought things would go back to how they were, but Lucas didn't want to spend any time with her, and as for changing diapers, forget it. I was really depressed, so I started to comfort eat, which made things even worse. Lucas threatened to leave me if I didn't lose weight, but his negative comments only made me eat more, and I ended up gaining 100 pounds. The more he called me names, the more I ate. I hated the way I looked, but I couldn't stop eating. It was the only thing that made me happy. After he left the army, Lucas couldn't get a good job, so he had to work as a barista to pay the bills. He started spending more and more time at work. He said he was getting overtime to pay for the baby, but whenever I asked him for money to buy formula, he said he didn't have any. I started to suspect he was having an affair, so I took Mia and waited outside his work one day. Sure enough, when he left the coffee shop, he was holding hands with another woman. They kissed before getting into his car and driving off. I raced home and started packing things for me and Mia. There was no way I was going to stay with someone who was cheating on me. When Lucas came home, my bags were in the hallway. "What's going on?" he asked. "I know you're seeing someone else," I yelled. "I'm leaving, and I'm taking Mia with me." Lucas begged me to stay. He promised he'd break up with the other woman and said he loved me more than ever. He took me to bed. We fell asleep in each other's arms, but when I woke up, I was alone. Lucas had left, and he'd taken Mia with him. He left me a note which said, "There's no way I'm letting my daughter grow up with a fat pig for a mother." I had to go to court to get my daughter back, but I couldn't afford a lawyer. Lucas's family paid for a lawyer for him, and he said I was a bad mother who was a danger to our daughter. He won full custody. I know some people think I deserve it for cheating on Jason with his brother, but I've learned my lesson. I'll never cheat on anyone ever again. Now, I'm working 2 jobs to save enough money to hire a lawyer. I won't rest until I have my daughter back.